Theris,
Last
right?
boss, no Theris.
Yeah, okay. So last boss, no Theris. Raging Tempest, obviously not good offensive. Primal Tsunami is Halls of Infusion, which if it's Primal Tsunami, we're going to see them all get sent in different directions. That'll be obvious.
Airtan's first boss of Vortex, right?
Yeah,
I believe so.
This could be that. It could be that. It could be that, right? Looking like they're spread around a mob like this. I don't think it's Saga.
I think it's well, no. I don't think you Raging Tempest for spreading out to soak orbs.
You would be more stacked for Primal Tsunami. Okay, I think it actually is Raging Tempest because that middle is the boss, right?
Well, the middle could be the boss for Grand Vizier as well, though, right?
Yeah.
But I don't think you'd be doing this movement. I don't think the movement would be this erratic for it. So I'm also thinking it's Raging Tempest.
Well, usually the tank sticks a bit closer to the boss for Grand Vizier, doesn't he?
So for Grand Vizier, no. For Grand Vizier, it was we had the teams. It was a TGP season. So the teams were like hard stacked to really make sure that they were getting the correct amount of healing during the intermissions, as opposed to Raging Tempest, where you would be fully spread.
Right. Yeah. You needed to be spread more often. I think it's Raging Tempest, but I don't know.
Well,
let's see.
You want to lock it in?
Starting to.
It's a shaman. It's Raging Tempest for sure.
Yeah.
Well, there's a Presevoker and a Feral Druid. Oh wait, no, that's a Resto Shaman.
Resto Shaman, Og Evoker, maybe.
Wog wasn't in season 1.
Og wasn't out when these were around. It could be a Dev
Raging
Evoker,
Tempest.
All right.
It is. Yeah.
Could have been a Dev, maybe.
Yeah.
I think
Enhancement Shaman was kind of nasty in season 1 too. Now
that's true. We did see some of those.
We did indeed.
It was fun. Oh, he's getting bigger. He's enraging. Oh no. Don't worry. When he gets close enough, he'll just only be a couple pixels, and then he won't be a threat at all. Still getting closer.
We can find a higher quality image of the boss.
I'm ready for my close-up, Mr.
You can
WoW
see
production.
the pixels.
Let's try. I've seen a few Raging Tempests in my day.
How many pixels does his eyes have? 3?
At least. Hey, you know what? Thanks, Warcraft Logs, for powering the dungeon movement maps. Go check out archon.gg/wow. They've got a new site out there to see some builds, gear, optimize your gear, learn the meta even more. And if you like the movement maps, which who wouldn't? They're tons of fun. Check out Warcraft Yaks on Twitter for even more of those. So, on that note, now it's time to get a little bit ready, and I'm told there's going to be a little bit longer of a break this time because we do obviously have Perplexed playing back-to-back games, so we need to give them a little bit of time to take a breather, get set for their match against Echo. But can anything prepare you for a match against Echo? Even an Echo in the lower bracket, I'm not so sure, but Perplex is going to give it a try. We'll see which group champion triumphs and moves on to face Mandatory in the grand finals of MDI. Don't go anywhere. We'll find out in just a few.
A bit of a tinfoil theory, but if Echo wins against getting so much off healing onto him and did manage to survive, so good on them not having to use a battle rest, not having a death there at all, not losing any time. Mandatory, even though they pulled the boss a bit later, they actually are DPSing the boss more, which to be fair is not necessarily faster on this boss, right? Because Alonso does, of course, cast a transfusion, which removes 25% HP of the boss each time every person has the debuff on them. So as long as you know, okay, we need 2 transfusions, then you can also just focus the damage on the trash rather than the boss, if it's not gonna save you 1 extra transfusion.
Yeah, the fast cycle, a lot of these MDI teams are able to do on like a 25 fortified. You just basically have to do 50% of the boss's HP in a minute 20, which again is pretty reasonable. Mandatory here, going to be having that transfusion coming out, and because they pulled the boss a couple of seconds later, they're going to be coming off the boss a few seconds. Actually, Miras died at the last take of the Tainted Blood, which means that Alunza didn't die. Okay, so Mandatory is in a little bit of a lead here. Got about 5 seconds ahead, plus 5 seconds of depth differential.
Yeah, and they immediately used the battle rest, which is also interesting, right? Because the boss was already dead, basically. But they know how fast-paced this dungeon is, so they immediately use that battle rest to make sure that they can get to Rasan quicker. They also all use Shadow Melt here too, so that means that they actually had to drop combat of that, I think the Juggernaut pack that they skipped, right? Instead of walking past.
I saw they were doing something a bit weird early on with their routing, where they were emceeing a Juggernaut and then melding it off, but I don't...
Has to walk to the last boss area, which is not going to make that big of a difference, but, you know, when it's this close between those 2 teams, it might actually... Yeah, the couple of seconds that it takes to walk there, I don't know.
I don't love the Raging Shield Bearers on Volcall. If they put that
look at how much faster Mandatory...
Stakes.
Yeah, I think so as well. They do have this Honor Guard here, which is a little bit unfortunate, as they did not manage to get the CC out. So that means that they're just going to have to deal with that one, off-tank it. They have to finish off these Sky Screamers, but as long as they just passively cleave the Screamers and just focus full damage onto Yasma, they're looking very, very strong. Echo, on the other hand, did now also engage the last boss, and they only need those 2 Sky Screamers on their side because they get that extra trash onto Volcall, so they need to do a little bit less cleave, but I don't think that really matters. They do have Bloodhouse coming out for both teams in about 2 minutes, and Celia does have that Incarnation that he seems to be holding for that cooldowns. We also see PI ready on Miras as well, while most cooldowns for Mandatory are actually still SD. We see Combust coming up by Crims, Maystein's Infernal coming up soon as well, looking really good for Mandatory.
Is this about to be a sub 10 minute Ataldazar, Nagura? We saw it a couple of times during the group stage.
They're so fast.
We didn't think this was going to be doable in a 25, but Mandatory is going to be able to put up a 9 minute and 30, I would say 2 second run, and this is going to be a huge map 1 victory for Mandatory.
Wow.
And I think chat
full size enough.
This is great for us. One thing, did you also notice that Celia keeps playing Orbital Strike in like all dungeons?
I have noticed it. I was not going to comment on it because people get weird when we talk about Moonkins on broadcast.
I know. Alright, interesting. So we do see both teams gathering up all of the trash, with Bloodlust of course being used. And here's the difference now with the cooldowns, right? Celia using Orbital Strike, using Incarnation to get all of this damage out, while we saw most of the other Moonkins that are playing, that are not playing Orbital Strike, they're not using their cooldowns on this big pool. They're saving their Incarn for the boss. So because of the difference in cooldowns, having a 2-minute incarn for Celia and a 3-minute incarn for Moat, they have to use their cooldowns in different spots, which is very interesting to see. I do like the 2-minute incarn, but you're gonna have less damage outside of your cooldowns compared to the other Moonkins with the Pulsar.
Yeah. Another thing that I just noticed as well is Moat is actually running the Fire Tank Trinket, which I have a suspicion that's for like the snapping stuff. Like, if they get meleeed by a Rift Mage and die, we are down horrendous, and so I think that's probably just like a safety pick.
Very interesting. Do see both Infernals being popped here, of course, as well by Clix and Maystine, and they're completely even on boss HP. So even though Mandatory did pull the boss a little bit later on their side, they actually caught up on boss damage even. Of course, might be the difference with the cooldowns we just mentioned earlier, right? Moat saving that incarnation for the boss while Sally did use it on the trash. His cooldown's coming up in 20 seconds. We'll see if he actually just sends it again for this boss or if he's holding on to it. Yeah, 44% for Mandatory in the first intermission, 52% for Echo. So already
Crash Pack pulled off while Echo still going through that portal, and I think that this is going to be great news for Mandatory fans. I think that they're in a position where there's no difference in the routes here. There's not much difference in the offensive cooldowns available for either of these teams. If Mandatory doesn't have any mistakes and any deaths, I think this should be their map to lose.
It definitely is, and we're already at match point here, right? So if Mandatory wins this, they're gonna be through to the global finals. This is such an important dungeon for Mandatory, and they're done with the trash. They're so far ahead at this point. I mean, of course, there's still a last boss to do. Let's not jinx anything here from Mandatory, as they have to do the last boss without the healer, which can be very dangerous, right? There's just so much incoming damage with the Infinity Orbs and with the damage, especially in the last phase. Echo now down with the trash too. Let's take a look at the offensive cooldowns. So we don't have Infernal ready for either of the teams just yet.
Okay.
We have Combust for Gingy. We have Incarnation for a Moat. We're only going to see one more Incarn. So there's not going to be any, like, 2 Incarns. We do have PI on cooldown. So one more PI, one more Incarn, and one more Infernal. Bloodlust available for both teams. Chrono Lord Deus is engaged for Mandatory. Well, let's see if they can survive. Any kind of death would maybe mean that Echo can catch up here. So they have to focus and not have anyone die here.
This is the hard part of the no healer composition. This is do or die for both Mandatory and Echo. There's a lot of danger on this pull with the Keepers. So whenever the Keepers spawn, they'll put like a magic dispellable debuff onto players. You do see that Mandatory marked with like the green icon. It has an imp. So they are able to get some dispels out. They also have the access to mass dispel occasionally. But that's not enough to actually get enough of these debuffs removed from either party for Mandatory or Echo. So instead, they're going to have to lust this double Keeper phase as it starts here in a couple seconds. Deus is he's going to summon this next Keeper, and then the double Keeper after is kind of where I'm expecting this lust to be. The downside of that is that the Infernal's not going to be up for it, but it's not going to be up for either of the teams, so I don't think it really matters too much. I think you just have to press.
I think so as well, especially just because of the incoming damage from... There we go, the Bloodlust is being used for Mandatory. Yeah. They're sending all cooldowns except that Infernal that is going to be up a little bit later. Stove actually holding on to the PI, possibly also for the Infernal whenever it does come back up. They're looking really good. We see a lot of defenses being juggled here. Nature's Vigil running for Moat, getting some of this off-healing in. Echo also waiting for their double Keepers to spawn, so they're going to be sending their Bloodlust in just a second as well. Again, also without that Infernal ready. There it is, Bloodlust for Echo too. Mandatory now done with the double Keepers, and Deus is at 11%. They're going to be blasting through this boss so quickly on Mandatory's side.
Mandatory, unfortunately, has Deus fly up into the air. If you actually push the Keepers fast enough, you can leave Deus on the ground permanently, allowing your tank and your healer to do a little bit more damage. Or, I guess no healer, but like allowing your tank to do a little bit more damage in this instance. But I don't think it's really going to matter. Look at this. Deus is at 8% for Mandatory, and for Echo, the boss has now just ticked over to 8%. I think this is going to be within 10 seconds.
I think so as well. Okay, Mandatory down to 6%. As soon as the boss hits 4%, you're gonna see some dragons flying in and helping out the damage. There are the dragons. Mandatory is gonna be blasting through this boss in just a second.
Look at Macy. He's nodding his head.
He's excited.
He's nodding his head. He knows. He knows that they're ahead. Then is this Mandatory going to the upper finals? Oh my God, Nagura. We talked about the plot armor of Echo. Mason nodding his head as Mandatory submit their place into the finals.
They did it! Mandatory by a margin of like 1%. You can see Macy and ecstatic. Who wouldn't be after a performance like that? And we've said it before. This is Mandatory's weekend, and they did it. And that means now Echo has actually lost 2 matches in this tournament. They lost to Dogs in Group A, now losing to Mandatory for a spot in the Grand Finals. There are cracks in the plot armor indeed, but Mandatory blasting those wide open with some incredible dungeon running.
Yeah, I was really impressed by this dungeon. We're gonna break down some of the little details all throughout this dungeon that I just thought were mentionable. Of course, the big one, you guys already called it out, was the snap not going 100% right for Echo, but we'll get to that in just a second. Now, here on this minigame, you can actually see now just zooming by on these rocket boots that we've now seen a couple of times. That's insane tech. It's just so cool.
I know you can do that.
Wait a second.
They're called Shadow Flame rockets, and they make you go very fast. We've now seen it by a couple of teams, and they actually use that later on again after killing off Grommash and Morchi to try and get faster through the area where Morchi is. But then, of course, here for the snap, they actually had Maystine still have a debuff from that sandpit area, so he couldn't get into the Shadow Melt and into the Invis to actually get by these ads, which slowed down their snap. And yeah, that was the big thing that cost them a couple of seconds there that unfortunately, I think, lost them this map in the end. We did also see from both teams some CC to deal with this more problems. Just a neat little tip that you can maybe take for your own games if you're watching, using that Sigil of Misery or even the Root. But yeah, here's that rocket flame tech one more time. Now just super zooming through this area.
I mean, we've seen that in the past with things such as like light flip potions or sky step potions to be able to speed things up. And so it kind of makes sense that these MDI teams are loving the Shadow Flame Rocket Tanker to just speed through the dungeon.
Yeah, I mean, it is about going fast, so it makes sense.
Does it surprise you that we haven't seen more of it earlier? Oh, by the way, speaking of surprising there, Mandatory finishing in 15:10. That's like a full 20 seconds or so faster than 30 seconds. Almost, yeah, faster than the last fastest run. So they continue to improve the time. That said, Echo would have beaten both of Mandatory's previous runs too, so blazing fast for them as well. But Mandatory just has what it takes to go to the finals, and I'm excited. I'm hyped. And now the lower bracket's going to be extra spicy with Echo down there. It's going to be crazy.
Well, this is the second time this season that we've seen them get sent to the lower bracket.
Yeah.
We know what happened last time.
They didn't lose another map. Yep.
But one thing to point out as well is I talked about their ban earlier, where they banned Fall twice, and it's not going to be in the final. But in the lower final,
there
is Skeleton's
ban it again.
So they either ban it again.
Maybe.
Yeah, so that means they don't have like another ban in case there's another dungeon that they're not super happy about. So they just have to ban that Fall, presumably.
Yeah, there's typically
there's
two. Oh, do you think there's tech?
No.
You never know.
I don't
you
think
never
so,
know.
but it would be cool.
But what would they save it for? For the lower final?
Well,
just when you got him on the ropes.
You know, Echo's just trying really hard to give us a good story here, Nagora. Can't you appreciate that?
It's all part of the plan. It's all. Here's what they wanted. They were like, okay, well, we're planning on Last Hope beating Perplex, and then we can have a Group A Finals rematch. You know, then we can show that, and then we can get to our rematch against Mandatory. See, it's all part of the plan. But I'm really wondering about Perplex as we look at this this graphic here. You know, Perplex has had a little bit of a rough weekend. They've been moving on, but it's been a little bit difficult. They did get dropped by Mandatory. They did manage to take out Eclipse, but it was a 2-1 victory. So we'll see. I mean, I feel like Perplex has a bit of the chip on their shoulder coming into this one. They want to show us a little bit better performance than what we've seen earlier in this weekend. Doing it against Last Hope is going to be tricky. But they're still in it, so we have our Group B winner versus our Group A runner-up in this next match.
Dude, I am like out of breath still.
Yeah. That was intense.
I was shaking a bit.
It's really more serious. Can you imagine?
They don't have us on camera, but I was like standing up for a while after that.
He was. It's true. Yeah.
Tettles literally jumped up in his chair.
Dude, I get hyped. I don't know. I'm just a big old nerd. I'm like, this is so.
I don't get excited or nervous for many things, but if a team beats Echo in the upper final, that makes me excited.
Yeah. I get it.
I mean, Twitch chat didn't believe either. Only 17% picked mandatory to win it, and all of us had Echo on the top of our predictions. So we will see. Oof. There you go.
I don't like my predictions now. I think my predictions are dead.
Yeah, mine might be that too.
It's still not.
Mace.
Well.
Yeah.
Why does Mace allowed to have two? Why does she allowed to have legendary and mandatory?
You're just seeing this
It's
now?
for flavor, Nagora.
Yeah,
you wouldn't
I just
understand.
Yeah. I mean,
cheating.
inspired by Dratnos, I guess you could say. Yeah, they just switch up the idea of the predictions. Kind of predict whatever you want. Yep. But Tettles, you're not necessarily out of the running yet. What you have predicted is still technically possible.
No, it's not.
Isn't it?
How?
Well, I mean, if
mandatory
made it to the finals, man.
Oh, you're right.
How was that possible?
Never mind. It's not. See, I can change this stuff whenever I want to, too.
Just showing the bracket again.
If
Production.
if we just change a couple things around, it's been a long weekend, all right? Let's look at a dungeon movement map. Let's forget what just happened. Let's forget what just happened in the last 15 seconds or so. And
taught me brackets and English today.
Hey, have you heard of dungeon movement maps? You try to guess a dungeon boss based only on the movement of the players. That sounds neat, doesn't it? Let's take a look and see what bosses it may be. Raw the Gluttonous, Iridicron, Time Lost Battlefield, an amalgam of souls. That's right, we're bringing back bosses from earlier seasons. So show me what you got. What do you think it is?
Well, none of these are from previous seasons,
but let's see. I think it's a bit zoomed in, and I'm gonna go.
Okay,
with,
it's not Raw, right? Because if it was Raw, we would see one person just always staying in melee.
Yeah.
So that one is not it.
Oh, this one's coming up fast. Oh god.
Yeah, for the
Paladin.
Oh, it's a paladin. It's amalgam. It's amalgam. It has to be a black rook, right? It has to be a black rook, right?
I think.
Or Iridicron. It could be Iridicron.
One more chance.
It could be.
Oh,
right.
Battlefield as well. It could be Battlefield too.
Lock it in. What's it gonna be?
I'm gonna with Battlefield.
Battlefield for Nagura. Tettles. Makes. Time is ticking.
God. I like Battlefield movement-wise. God, I'm taking Battlefield. Fine.
All right, Battlefield for
I'm
two of our
gonna say
analysts.
amalgam.
Amalgam for Makes. What is it? It is Battlefield.
Just pumping the air. Let's go. Let's go. We're so back.
Yep. That's like the weirdest rendition of the American Gothic painting I've ever seen.
Dude.
If you're an art nerd, you know what I'm talking about.
It's the farmer and that woman.
If you're not, then I'm just speaking gibberish.
It's the farmer, right? The farmer painting, yeah?
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
They're both just kind of staring at the camera with kind of blank expressions. Their belt buckles have more emotion than their faces do.
Okay.
There you go. I mean, hey, argue with me? I don't know. Oh, do we have another one?
Wait, what is this?
All right.
Oh my
Wait,
god.
what?
Oh,
This isn't
An
dungeon
arena?
running at all. This is arena.
How is that one guy going like in a perfect 90-degree corner?
Why are they
is
going?
What I'm asking.
700%
Movement abilities. Because it's an arena match.
I'm gonna go with Tiger's Peak. I don't know any of these arenas.
I'm gonna go.
But I like the names.
I
so
think
I'm
it's
gonna go
Ashamane's.
I think it's
Hey,
Dalaran
me
Sewers.
too. I'm going Dalaran
That
Sewers.
90-degree corner is
Exactly.
where you just go around that corner and try to line of sight there.
Yeah, you just
That's
gotta
what
hop
I'm
down
gonna
there
say.
sometimes. I agree. I agree.
Yeah.
Hiding down.
I don't
it's
know
Ashman's,
anything
but I
about PvP, but if I say it with enough confidence, it'll probably make sense.
It's not Lordaeron
There's-
Ruins because it doesn't look like
you
there's
see
anything in
this
the middle
just
people are
square?
avoiding.
Like the middle, there's like some
Yeah,
rectangular
that's why I
shape.
think it's Dalaran.
PvP
Okay,
community
it's funny
tilted.
because I don't know how any of the
Oh, it is
Oh,
Lordaeron
my
Ruins.
God.
Oh, come on. All right.
The idea was good. The execution was not.
Oh.
Look, that 90-degree corner, top right.
Oh yeah,
thing.
beautiful.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
No, man. What are we doing here?
I don't know. We're filling
just
time.
types in our group chat a fitting final resting place. Why are we getting flamed by the caster that's not even on right now? This is insane.
Gotta do something, you know. What's your PvP spec of choice? Since we all PvP a little bit, don't we?
I'll get hated if I say it. So
why not? No, you can play whatever you want.
I don't play this. No.
I don't think would any of us call ourselves competitive in WoW PvP. I'm a for fun WoW PvPer. Oh well, Tettles, what do you play in WoW PvP competitively?
Resto Druid, because I'm a cultured
gosh.
individual.
I've no
a healer enjoyer, some would say.
Okay.
I only play Moonkin when Convoke is OP.
I've been there. That was a good season.
That has happened before. Yeah. Makes. Don't be afraid.
I play the same classes and specs I always play.
That's perfectly fine.
Oh, DKDH. Yes, of course.
Yep.
All right.
Good classes.
I've always been partial to Arms Warrior. I know I talk about Enhancement Shaman a lot, but when it comes to Arena, it's been Arms mostly for me. Out there, mortal striking, you know, charging, heroic leaping, battle shouting. Oh, we're good to go to a break. All right, well, we'll do that when we come back, everybody. We've got another match here on the Mythic Dungeon International. It's the final day of the Global Finals. Do not miss it. It's going to be Perplexed versus Last Hope in the lower bracket semis when we come back. See you in just a few.
Dude, Dove's just like...
we're back here at the Mythic Dungeon International. Your host here along with titles Dratnos and Zyronic. Welcome. What a match. What a series of games we just witnessed, getting to see Mandatory sending Echo to the lower bracket. Obviously, we have a lot to cover today, but I just want to get your opinions, both of you, on that last series. What do you think? Who wants to go first? Go to you, Dratnos. Oh, I'm sorry, Zyronic.
No, okay, yeah, I mean, obviously it's just an incredible outcome, right? Like,
see ya.
So, okay, there's two different competing trains of thought that I have. One is, this is it, this is the weekend, right? This is the time where Echo get dethroned. The other one is, they've been in the lower bracket before, they get sent to the lower bracket every now and then, it happens, and then sometimes they just clutch it out and win out from there, so... I mean, it's a huge opportunity for Mandatory. Mandatory now have the next couple hours to just practice that Grand Finals matchup, just get ready to fight Echo. Echo are going to have to instead be ready to fight the winner of this series that we're about to watch, which means it's also a huge opportunity for either Perplexed or Last Hope to potentially then also get against Echo and take them out too. So it's going to be an unbelievably intense couple of hours here. And honestly, if you're a Mandatory fan, you're hoping these are some nice, long, grueling series that grind down your future opponents, and then you've got just some nice, chill practice time for a while.
Well, yeah, there's also the added, thing where the winner of this series is then going to be going up against Echo, right?
Time.
Yeah, I think that's precisely what we are going to see from Perplex. Just tagging that into the boss fight here will happen in a little while. I really loved how we saw that gateway just being used simultaneously for both teams here. But you can see a little bit of a difference in the team's priority, and that is something that we saw, I believe, in day one as well, where Perplexed actually focused down Earthshaper Telu first, and Echo goes for the Life Warden first.
I do also just want to point out just how much damage Celia is doing on this pull. Absolutely incredible. Saving the Convoke. Actually, for this boss fight, Perplex, Savvy did use the Convoke earlier, and then just used it again for this fight. Well, which means that his Convoke was up a little bit later. Sally had it immediately, used it Heart of the Wild with the Convoke, and up to 10.4 million damage onto this boss. Savvy, on the other hand, 8.4 million. Not that far behind, but still just a little bit of a difference here in offensive cooldown. So behind field dropping really low as he's pulling in some extra trash on their side.
Yeah, this is where it comes in, but in the overall boss progression, it still looks like they are very much tied here. Now, you need to make sure that nothing goes wrong with the extras as they do come running in. On the left-hand side, we get a couple more cultivators, blossoms running towards the pack, but of course the important thing is the boss's HP that you want to move through. And while the healers are also doing damage, they now also need to top up the group. You can see it on Perplexed side as well as on Echo side. These bursting stacks are starting to tick in and need to be helped as well.
Yeah, we do see Echo certainly a little bit ahead. It looks like, well, at least they're ahead on Telu. Dulu is actually higher in comparison, so Perplexed has a lot more even cleave on their side, while Echo focused down the two casters first. So that means that Perplexed maybe not even that far behind if they manage to get that even cleave going. But Echo only having Dulu left, all of the trash down on their side, and they are moving on. We're going to see the difference in just a moment on that first boss split. And we do know that Echo is going to Witherbark second.
7 seconds between the two teams here. Perplexed now a tiny smidge behind, but it is all still open as they are running to the next area. You said it already. We know that Echo is going to go Witherbark. I would expect that Perplexed is doing the same thing, and the big question, of course, is how are they going to approach that area? How much are you able to tack into Witherbark? It is a tyrannical boss, so you are going to be there for a while. Notably, the last time we saw Echo on it, they actually killed off a lot of orbs to try and meld as much in that boss burning phase as they can and extend it for as long as possible, which allowed them to then finish off the boss quicker. So I'm going to be looking on whether or not Perplex does the same thing, but right now, of course, they need to activate it first, and we do have Nalrot into the pack for Echo.
Yeah, we have Nalrot in there for Echo, and Perplex already has pulled those 3 caster mobs that are there to spawn Archmage on their side. So that means that they are actually this pull that Perplex is doing pretty difficult. As you can see, all of these casts going through that have to be interrupted. The Pyromancer, the Arcanist, all of these Arcane Blasts, all the Frost Bolts as well. And you have that Cinder Bolt storm going through. Plus all of the bursting stacks now ramping up. You can see the Master Spell is on cooldown. So Sevi does go down to bursting actually. So does have to use that Battle Rest to get back up.
Yeah, so they had so many ads in there that they used that Master Spell after the majority was down, but then the remaining ticks were still too much for Sevi there in the end did get knocked down by that final tick. Echo already on to Witherbark, and Perplexed is gonna do the same thing now, tagging in some of the final Dread Petals to try and get this one going. On the left-hand side, you're gonna see some of the Cultivators run in together with these Dread Petals as well, as Zelia drops really low here, must have been gotten hit by one of these casts.
Yeah, so Frostbolt going through, Echo doing the strat a little bit differently, now pulling those 3 casters for Archmage Soul onto Witherbark rather than having it on the initial pull. So now they have to use all of those interrupts on the Pyroblast, on the Frostbolts, on the Arcane Blast. That's why Sally actually got a Blast go through. Frostbolt actually the least deadly cast of all 3 casts it can go through. So maybe even happened on purpose because of course they do have limited amount of interrupts available with this full range comp. But yeah, looking really strong. Now the most important thing for both of these teams is to stay in this extra damage phase on Witherbark as long as they can, making sure all of these globules are intercepted with the roots on the ground by placing them perfectly, or even finishing off some of these globules by switching the damage onto them.
Yeah. You can see it here on the left-hand side for Echo really well, and that is what I was mentioning earlier on. They've really tried to extend this phase for as long as they possibly can. Both Clicks and Gingy turning around, as well as Mirrors, of course, to try and dot these as early as possible, make sure that they're really low when they reach the boss and they are actually able to finish them off while also dealing damage to the boss. You are going to need to pay attention to that blue mana bar on Witherbark. Once that is full, we're in trouble land, so they are trying to extend this as long as they can. Perplex doing the same thing, and it looks like they're even doing better at that, though now some of these globules come pretty close here. It is going to be another photo finish between the two teams on that second boss split here.
Echo is out of the phase. Alright, so Perplex doing a better job with the globules. Echo, no more damage increase on the boss. Perplex still has the damage increase. These last globules coming through. There we go. Now Witherbark also out of that extra damage phase for Perplex. But look at the percentage now on the boss. Both are pretty even in enemy forces. Echo slightly ahead, but that's not actually going to matter for them too much. But Perplex being able to catch up a little bit on this boss, just because they managed to be in that phase slightly longer in comparison. Echo still finishing off the boss earlier because they engaged the boss quite a bit quicker. And now they're gonna have that gateway that is already set up to get back to get to Archmage Soul. Perplexed, I'm not sure if they did have a Shine put up the gateway. I don't think so because they took a little bit of a different route. So that means their travel time is gonna be a little bit longer here.
Yeah, you can see them now trying to make way up there, but it is a little bit around the block, but they are going to reach the Archmage area as well. The Minefield, unfortunately, at the end of the block, and they're actually going to send it here right away. Of course, a little bit behind Echo once again, as Echo's already into that pack. Now, there is a lot that can cause chaos here. You can see some Dread Petals actually joining the fight here for Perplexed to try and get some extra count together with yet another caster, but there are some casts you need to interrupt. Your tank is struggling, there's massive AoE, you get pulled across the arena, and one of your ranges needs to bait these arcane orbs to make sure that they do not hit into melee. So lots of stuff going on at the same time, and Archmage Soul has claimed lives of players before.
Definitely has. Does look like both teams are handling the trash really well, though. Divine is gonna pull even more trash into this boss here. And of course, Echo still a little bit ahead on the boss because they were, not only were they a little bit faster in Witherbark, they also had that setup with the gateway because of the different routing they took after that first boss that they were doing. Echo looking really clean on their side, and if they can stay clean, I do think Echo is gonna be ahead in this one. But Perplex, of course, not too far behind, so if anything happens to Echo, make any kind of mistakes, or a little bit of a difference in offensive cooldowns as well, that might be everything that Perplex needs to catch up here.
I think a big issue now, dropping very, very low here for Echo, but is able to be topped off here. A big issue for Perplex is going to be that extra 5 seconds penalty. They already have around 7 seconds in the first and second boss split that they are behind in the overall, and adding those 5 seconds on top of that feels so minute in terms of the MDI, but it is going to be those seconds that matter in the end. That could be the determining factor as Echo finishes out. Archmage Soul, Genji goes really low, but is able to survive as the bursting stacks now come in. They are going to be able to mass them, spell them off, and moving on to that final boss, I suspect. Yeah, we're going to see yet another gateway just perfectly placed to make sure they break through this wall. Perplex now on their heels, but still need to do a little bit of extra trash before they can move on. They're just going to try and tag it in over to the other side.
Look at Echo though, having everything perfectly planned out for this Bloodlust here. Bloodlust available just as they reach the boss, Infernal available, Combust, PI, everything being popped, even Heart of the Wild and Convoke from Celia, all ready for this moment. They perfectly spaced out their offensive cooldowns to get the maximum amount of damage onto this boss here. And it's going to be so difficult for Perplex to replicate this. They are also the last boss, but their cooldown's not quite the same. They don't have that Infernal available. They don't have the Heart of the Wild yet. Convoke actually being used without the Heart of the Wild versus Sevi. So not as well planned out as it is for Echo. And look at how much the boss is melting for them.
Yeah, absolutely true. Bloodlust now has run out. Genesis is being cast as everybody is running around trying to soak these petals. At least a little bit of it. The rest will be tanked by now here, as we are going to be getting another set of extra damage that will go out. One more ad, I suspect, is going to spawn for Echo before they can clock in that win. That is the only thing that is between them and the global finals. The revenge to mandatory, the one thing they need to get done right now. Rodent Eruption does come in here. Here's the Ancient and Perplex. Just so close, but in the end, those final seconds are what matters.
Yeah, I mean, they're looking so strong. Look at that. There's still some defensive stuff to use to make sure they're not dying to any of these combos. There we go, the last Genesis coming out. And you can see the boss on 20% for that second ad spawn is just so good for them. Perplex was on 34% in comparison. So definitely doing a really good job with that single target damage. And there we go. Echo now gonna be beating that third ad for sure. And Yalno is about to go down. And that means Echo is gonna claw their way back into that global final here against Mandatory. Winning against Perplex with a 2-0 in what a convincing fashion.
No kidding.
Wow.
It is so hard as we do zoom in on Mirrors there and check his response to that. A little bit of relief maybe showing on the face, but it's just one of those things, right? Where it's like, it wouldn't be an MDI Global Finals without Echo, and it's not going to be this time. Echo is going to go on to get their rematch versus Mandatory, and that is going to be a great series. It was back and forth earlier in the day. Mandatory knows they've got what it takes to go toe-to-toe with Echo. I think it's going to be an awesome set of dungeons. But before we get there, we got to break this one down a bit more.
The thing that stands out to me at the start of this dungeon every single time we see it is the efficiency with which Echo gathers this first pull. And one of the things that you can look at that as a measure of that is the burst DPS, right? Because combat starts when you start pulling a pull together. And if you get a higher burst of DPS, that means your pull was stacked more efficiently. Echo has had higher bursts on the Warlock on that pull over every other team. Most teams will see 3.5 to 4 mil. Clicks there, he was over 5 mil. That's
wow.
Absolutely bonkers, man. That is a ridiculous amount of extra damage to be doing. But even with the slight increase there, it was still pretty close after they killed the first boss off, right? And the big difference in this dungeon was the gateway strategies I think the teams kind of showed off. Echo was doing the more typical strategy where you gateway down from Archmage Soul to Witherbark's area when they gather up their trash, whereas what we saw from Perplexed is they just took their initial gateway back towards the first part of the dungeon, ran around, they set up the next pull at roughly the same time as Echo, but they didn't have that gateway up to Archmage Soul instantly having to go up there, right? They had to run around, they had to jump on a route, they had to set up a new gateway, it cost them another 10-15 seconds of time, and at that point they were just too far behind. Echo ran away with it, And one of the things I really want to point out about Echo is the scary consistency that they've had this entire tournament in the dungeons they've run more than once. Wakecrest Manor, which we just saw them run, they've been hovering around that 12:30, 12:35 mark in all 3 of their runs of Wakecrest Manor. Ridiculously fast times, 12 to 12:20. They're just stupidly fast. Everbloom, their time earlier, 12:33. Their time here, 12:29. Like, they are just on it with their consistency. They just haven't been making any major mistakes. And we're about to see a matchup between Echo and Mandatory with both of these teams just playing at peak performance, and I cannot wait to see who's going to come out on top.
Yeah, we'll get there soon. I do want to talk a little bit more about Perplex as we take a look at our final bracket here. They had a great tournament. They won Group B, obviously. They battled their way back through the lower bracket, going down to Mandatory, but then 2-1 versus Eclipse, 2-1 versus Last Hope. Put up a good show against Echo, but it wasn't quite enough. But Perplex, again, one of those teams that seems to always be hanging out, right? I mean, if they don't make the finals, they're close.
Yeah, I mean, I think Perplex the only teams they lost against was a peak performance Echo and a peak performance Mandatory, right? Like, they won against all the other teams and they did such a good job, and it could have gone a different way if any of those teams that they played against, like Mandatory and Echo, would have made a small mistake on their side. Which, to be fair, is obviously not something that you can bank on, but I do think that Perplex did perform really well, and on a different day, they could have been winning this whole weekend or gotten second as well. So, really great performance by Perplex.
Yeah, it's interesting because Echo is just this, obviously juggernaut of a team. They're just that good. And then you've got Mandatory, who's having, like, maybe their best weekend of games ever that we've seen. And Perplex just kind of ending up being the victim of both of those things, right? Where, yeah, like you said, on a different weekend, maybe we'd see a different story. Certainly a great team, and hopefully one we won't have to wait too long to see again.
Yeah, I mean, I think it comes back to the same thing we've been saying for the entire weekend. Now that we've kind of filed down on the groups, we've been getting an insane level of competition all throughout this weekend. And I think this is just the product of that. Seeing teams like Perplexed, like Last Hope, like Echo, like Mandatory battle it out. Even teams like Bolt Bandits, Eclipse, Legendary Dogs, teams we've lost along the way in the past 2 days. All of these teams being so incredibly close to each other, not in every single dungeon, but in a multitude of dungeons where you really go into each series and you think, okay, this could swing either way. I do kind of want to get back to what you were saying, Zyra, though, the consistency of Echo, because one dungeon we haven't seen them be very consistent in this weekend is the Rise, and that is going to be the first key up for the global finals, so that is definitely something that I'm going to be very, very eager to watch and curious if they can turn that around.
Yeah, we're gonna break down the maps a bit more because there's actually a ton to talk about in the maps going into this this grand finals. But before we get there, I feel like we should do a dungeon movement quiz. We'll get there. We got a lot to talk about. So let's quiz our analysts one more time, and I'll join in on this one because I like to throw out things to confuse them and perhaps help them get it wrong, apparently.
One sec, muting Doa on my end.
Yeah, good idea. That's a good idea. That's unfortunately for the chat, they can't selectively mute people themselves. So, ha! But is it going to be Priestess Alzuna, Chronikar, Azumat, or Time Lost Battlefield? What do you think? We got one person starting off pretty far away. Oh, that's a lot of spreading going on.
Yeah, so this makes me think it could be no. Okay, for a second I thought maybe it's Ozumath and we just see like the monk outside doing their own thing, but they're too close to each other now.
I mean, is this the portal tech during Time Lost Battlefield that we're seeing, or are we zoomed out far enough to see the bouncing around?
I don't think so with the amount of movement we're seeing here. That wouldn't make much sense. So I think we can... Well, unless it's just the last phase of Time Lost Battlefield, because technically only the last encounter is the boss, right?
It's possible, yeah.
I'm going with
I doubt.
Chronikar here.
Chronikar? Why is that? Why is that, Nakura?
I don't know
Oh.
which boss that is, so I'm just going with that one.
Okay. See,
maybe
nobody can criticize that.
It's Osamad.
Maybe it's
No, it's
it's
Priestess
Alonza.
Alonza,
Wow.
of course.
Why is there a monk?
Right there in the middle. Yeah.
Who ran
Where's
a
the
monk
monk
in
there?
Altazar?
That's mug. I don't know.
Must have been one of our
Anyway.
cup matches.
Nobody can criticize us
Huh.
for not knowing the boss name sometimes because you
yeah.
know when you're out there playing M+, you never refer to the bosses by their names. You're just like, oh yeah, that boss that does that thing. Oh, you know, like the transfusion boss.
Next boss.
Yeah,
Boss
exactly.
1, boss
Nobody-
2, boss 3.
Nobody uses
last
boss names. Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
if anyone
yeah.
says otherwise, they're just lying.
Exactly. Don't listen to them. Do go to archon.gg/wow. You can find the most popular builds, optimize your gear, learn the meta, learn the boss names, and even more. And also check out Warcraft Yaks on Twitter for even more movement. One final break, and when we come back, the grand finals of the Mythic Dungeon International. It's going to be a super hot mandatory versus the old standbys Echo. Who is going to come out triumphant? We'll find out right after this.
You're watching the Epic homepage?
I'm pretty sure I've been muted most of the time. Just realized.
Your Discord is streaming World of Warcraft, or the Epics, or the Battlestar, or BattleNet page.
Oh.
I wonder if your stream's doing the same thing.
No.
Oh, and I'll leave you. I'll put you on.
No need for that. I'm pretty sure I've been muted this whole time, and I tried to say hi to Brad when he chatted, and I said nothing, and he didn't hear shit, which makes sense why he didn't respond.
All right.
God damn it. I swear to God. There we go.
Nice.
Yeah, and also you gotta stop by so you can come grab your chain.
Oh yeah. Well, maybe we'll do that right now.
You going
I
out
have to leave. Well, I have to leave right now to go get Ava's nails done.
Oh, okay.
I'll just stop by real quick or something.
Word.
Won't interrupt you.
we're back here at the Mythic Dungeon International. Your host,
Okay, sorry, Chad. I gotta leave you one more time. I gotta go help my brother out real quick with his car. Thanks, Fingers. I appreciate it, buddy.
It is going to be an extended series. A team needs to win 3 dungeons, only 2 to become the champion.
Goddamn right he's on.
Absolutely fantastic. Echo, who has been absolutely
Oh,
fantastic.
My favorite
wide.
streamer.
Open wide.
We will see.
Got some fluid for you. I'm gonna go. I gotta go help my neighbor put some shit up on his truck real quick. He's got one of those tent things.
On the Everbloom. Okay, by mandatory.
I'll be right back.
Still bans the Throne of Ties. I'm convinced.
I'll text you here in a sec. I might head that way.
All right, come on over. I'll probably be in the basement.
Echo was about to ban.
All right, and just leave the door unlocked or something.
Yep, garage is open.
I
right,
think
cool,
that
bye.
Mandatory's win condition is probably Rise the Tall Throne. But now with the throne getting banned, maybe it's Rise the Tall Darkheart.
Well, you know what's interesting about the Murazan's Rise, and Megs alluded to this a little bit before the break, was that this dungeon was actually the last dungeon these two teams played against each other in the semifinals earlier today. That was one that Mandatory won. So right off the bat, we get to see essentially 2 Murazan's Rises in a row between these 2 teams, and see if Echo can maybe come back and get a little bit of revenge here. Anybody?
I mean, it was just so eloquently put, though. I thought you did a great job.
Say something. Thanks, I appreciate that. Yeah. Well, here's our dungeons again. Atal Dazar seems like it's kind of Echo's. It was Echo's dungeon, but again, that's another one that Mandatory won. Our first 2 dungeons are dungeons that Mandatory just beat Echo in last time they met.
So apparently Mandatory also put just a jillion hours in Waycrest Manor, but I feel like Echo's been a bit too clean in that dungeon.
Yeah,
I don't know how you guys feel.
It's the only dungeon they won in the last series.
I think that, given it's a 24 Sanguine dungeon, we've seen, Perplex just play that in their series, right? And had Sanguine healing issues, had mob management issues. I think that it's not a dungeon you can ever really have at a we're going to do this 100% every single time we do it level, right? It's a lot is going to depend on whether you show up on any given day with that, with the fire, with the perfect play. And so far today, that's been Mandatory. It's not been Echo. The question is whether they'll be able to keep that alive into this series. This is what they've been building towards, right? This is what it's all been building up to. All the practice, all the cups so far is to get them into this grand finals, the opportunity to dethrone Echo. But they just have to keep it clean for another hour or so. Another 3 dungeons is all they need.
All right, looks like it's time for dungeon number 1 to start. Get to see who takes the early lead. Is it going to be Mandatory? Is it going to be Echo? Let's find out.
All right, I'm so excited for this one. Of course, we're going into that Rise first, which is the dungeon that Mandatory played so incredibly clean in, with 0 deaths in all 3 times they played this dungeons across the board. 3 times, and they have the best run overall as well, with the 15 minutes and 10 seconds clear. Let's see what they're going to be doing here as they both pull the whole room here with all of the mini bosses. Very difficult to execute. Bloodlust being popped for both teams. We do know that we have a little bit of a difference in cooldown allocation, as Mode is sitting on that incarnation for the boss, while Sally is actually using it here. And other than that, it is pretty similar. Echo finishing off the mini bosses a little bit earlier, so they're also going to get the boss spawn early on their side.
Yeah, Mode going to go on a brief adventure here for Mandatory, but like you said, that RP has been started earlier for Echo, so they'll be able to fight the boss. It's actually quite a long time that you have to wait for Tyr to become attackable, which is why teams always try and find something good to be doing during this downtime. And Mandatory have got this pull nearing the end, although now they're all raging, so a little bit of danger. Mode returns to the group with some extra enemies in tow. Echo are going to be entering combat with Tyr first, though. Definitely the early advantage. Well, I mean, Mandatory may be coming out of here with some more count. We'll have to actually look at the end once Tyr goes down, but I think Mandatory have grabbed a little bit more total trash.
Yeah, and we do have difference in offensive cooldowns a little bit here too, right? So that means they might be able to catch up on the boss HP because of that incarnation from Mode, while Celia, we know, is not gonna be using that one for the boss whenever it comes back up. He's going to be holding it for that 2 trash mobs after here. So, and yeah, there you go. Look at the percentage. Mandatory now ahead of Echo, even though they pulled the boss quite a bit later.
Yeah, this is looking so far so good for Mandatory. Both teams on 0 deaths. A dangerous starting area to this dungeon, again, especially because neither team is playing a healer, right? Both teams have pushed their healer onto the Moonkin. Ooh, it looks like an orb nearly connecting for Echo. Maybe was absorbed just in time, though. And they've done a pretty good job of distributing those damage stacks across their DPS players. Everybody except for Gingy getting up to 5 stacks for Echo on the DPS side of things. I guess Azalea as well. Mandatory also doing well.
Don't tell me there's no fluid.
Once again, not lining it up with Infernal this time, but it will line up next time, so that'll work out pretty nicely. And we'll be able to see whether they've been able to... Actually, they are going to be able to do it. My goodness. They get tier down 2 seconds ahead of Echo. But like you said, Zaylee has Incarn here, Mode does not.
Yeah, a little bit of a difference. We also see Crims from Mandatory having that combust, while Gingy did use it a second time, a 4 tier here. So that means the damage on these 2 mobs might be still equal, just a little bit of a difference in offensive cooldowns that are being used. And yeah, I mean, looking really good for both teams. It's just going to be, again, such a close match between those 2 teams. And the maze that is coming up is going to be really important again. Both teams, if they have all 5 members be able to get through first try, that's going to make a big difference. Of course, both of them have to open that portal because otherwise they're not going to be getting that graveyard update. But Echo dealing with the 2 mini-bosses a little bit quicker.
Yeah, now comes that gauntlet. This gauntlet is very important. Now going to use his rocket boost, the Shadow Flame rockets, combined with his Demon Hunter gliding wings to get right over there and just get to the other side and start the RP of those 2 dragons spawning as quickly as possible. Mandatory, on the other hand, a little bit more standard maneuver through this area. And once the rest of Echo joins now, he'll be able to get right in combat with these 2 dragons.
Oh.
Mandatory making it through as well. And did Echo finish activating their graveyard is my question.
It did not necessarily look like, but so now at least stopped channeling and engaged the 2 bosses. It's possible that someone else was like finishing the channel afterwards?
They did not. We are getting confirmation from our admins that Echo have not finished channeling the graveyard here, which... So that portal is really nice because it lets you get somebody through if they mess up the RP, which that happens in my groups most of the time. Usually it's me. But in Echo's case, the main reason you would want to activate that portal is that it updates your graveyard. So now if anybody in Echo dies and they don't have a res or a battle res available for that person, they're going to be out of luck. They're going to have to run back all the way through that RP gauntlet again. At the start of our weekend, we've seen Echo drop this map. Oh, it's happening again. There goes 2 deaths for Echo, Miraz and Zalia going down, and they can't release. If they hit release Spirit, they're going to have to run all the way back to the RP again, but they can't not release, can they? I mean, they're going to be a battle res on Zalia.
Yeah, battle res on Zalia.
Oh, and then he is not in combat.
All right.
He didn't. I don't think he even had to meld.
He has a magic debuff on him.
Oh my goodness, he's in danger.
Alright, so they got the out of combat rest. Oh, Clicks does go down to an infinite burn. They don't have interrupts because of their damage dealers being down. And they do have to use another out of combat rest to get him back up. This is such a big time loss for Echo because they didn't activate that portal.
And also, this is the Rift Mage that they wanted to snap, right? They wanted to bring this over to the side, but they had to kill it so they could... Oh, it's not? Okay, alright, yeah, no, we're good, we're good. It's all good. Okay, phew. Not to worry. This is the second, not the third Rift Mage.
Right? So Zalia cannot Shadow Meld to rescue here because he needs to Shadow Meld for the Rift Portal strategy. So they have to finish up the trash here. They have to rest Clicks. Then they have to do the Rift Mage pull. This is going to be an insane time loss. Now, I do want to say, though, that this was such a... Like, yes, they lost a lot more time.
No.
They lost a lot more time. Oh, it's fine. Miraz is resting. Yeah, so again, Zalia is going down. Oh, God. Okay, so this is... Again, so much time lost because of that portal not being activated. But I do want to say that even if the portal was activated, they still would have lost to Mandatory. Like, this is a high-risk strategy that is not saving them that much time. But that's exactly what they needed to do to win against Mandatory if they have a clean run. Now, of course, they lost a lot of extra time here without that portal. But if Mandatory has a clean run, they would have lost either way with those 2 deaths. Right?
Yeah, those 2 deaths were bad.
Yeah, exactly. So I think not opening the portal, yes, it immediately backfired for Echo, but yeah, I think they would have lost either way if Mandatory has a perfect run with those 2.
Skylark now looks like trying to set up the summon accept tech, but it's actually, he's still in combat with one of these mobs, so he's gonna have to go stand in the sand, die, and then able to actually finally, oh, maybe he didn't die. No, all right, so he just had to get far enough away from that distortion to drop combat with it, and weird mob behavior. They do that when they start snapping. Stuff gets weird, but Mandatory have managed to actually do it without having to sacrifice Skylark. Did cost him his cheat death, though, going and standing in the sand like that, and Mandatory strat is looking good. They have the Rift Mage exactly where they want it. Things are going well for Mandatory. Echo are trying to recover this, but... oh, no. Is that... Have we pulled the mobs behind us here? Yes, we have. Zalia's pulled the mobs behind him. Now his cheat death proc is activated. Zalia is going to try and still kill the Rift Mage. So he's going to try and kill the Rift Mage before dying here. Oh, no, but the Time Bender is going to put a shield on it. Oh, things could not be going worse. All right, we're all right. It's all good. Now Zalia is just going to jump off, I think. What's his plan here? Yeah, all right.
He's going to die.
And then he's gonna release, but now he can't get resummoned because he's died.
And he can't
so
rest
his summon's
because they don't
gone.
have the portal. He's gonna
and if he releases Spirit, oh, this is potentially the worst thing to have ever happened to anybody running a dungeon. Is what's happening for Echo here. I mean, just absolute catastrophe, a cascading sequence of disasters for them. I am so...
Easy.
It's heartbreaking to watch here. But Maystein gonna go down to an anachronistic decay. That's one of the ads actually hitting him.
As well as
the dot from the ad going into the trap. Even,
I did at one point, yeah. I checked the audio on my stream.
Maystein for Mandatory, so they don't have any battle reses anymore. It could be an opening for Echo here.
Yes, sir.
Looks like Mirez went through the portal. Okay, yeah, they all went through the portal, and they were just able to res Zalia. So
how's the
good
little
job by Zalia not
going?
actually releasing there. It would have taken them
Interesting.
longer, and Echo are now
we had some close ones earlier.
Their plan.
Now it is the last game of the
14,
finals here.
Mandatory are nearly
Or the
finishing
upper
14.
finals. Mandatory and Echo, but Echo is looks like they had a wipe, unfortunately.
And, 20 seconds of death timer as well.
Yeah, so
and they are well behind as well, unfortunately.
100% perfectly for Mandatory either. This run for Mandatory is not going to be...
Mandatory's been killing it today.
As fast as their fastest run, in my opinion. They did have that death, and they also
they had one death early on,
with,
and then they didn't have a death for quite some time. That's pretty good.
Could be with if it was a perfect run. But Morchi is going down in just a moment here for Mandatory, and they're going to be going back to
Mandatory didn't beat the phase, so now they have to actually wait.
Kind of nice that it's quiet in the Discord fluid now.
For Mandatory, this run has certainly not been clean for them, but like you said, not as bad as it has been for Echo.
Oh man, the topics that we get into.
It's fun, isn't it? Always right before I stream.
Not cost them the dungeon, so not open a portal. Maybe too high.
Don't you love that fluid?
Mm-hmm. Glad the interesting conversation stops as soon as I start streaming.
They did adapt on the fly pretty.
We could literally have our own podcast fluid.
We keep saying that.
we literally could have our own like Discord podcast.
Forgetting about the fact that they have the portal. Zalia saying that, them discussing, you know what, you should say that, we're gonna finish this off, we're gonna go back and rest. So they made the best out of it. But yeah, obviously still Echo behind at this point, as Mandatory is about to finish up. Gromish Hellscream here, Echo just now getting to Gromish as well. Both of the teams having Bloodlust available. We
Echo pissed this one away.
Their strategy, they are saving it.
Rest in piss, bitches.
Yeah, Power Infusion actually going to land on Gingy here for Echo rather than Click.
Just round one, though.
Gingy not actually able to activate Combustion until just about now as it falls off, so damage maybe a little bit. One of the problems with when you start dying and wiping is that your carefully calculated CDs start getting desynced from each other and all of your plans start falling apart here, and certainly Echo are in that kind of run. They are still doing some very, very good damage, though, to Grommash. And they should be able to get this done, and then we'll kind of be able to see... It is something like a minute, I think, that Mandatory are in the lead here. That's quite a lot.
Yeah, definitely looking really strong on Mandatory side. All eyes on them as they're moving towards that last boss area, and of course, the trash that they still have to be doing to get there. We have most cooldowns available, but we know they're probably going to be saving some for the last boss. And yeah, they need to get through, wait for Chromie to activate the portal here. Echo now also done on their side, as they're also trying to move as fast as they can through this. Now actually pulling the trash mobs here with a Fear Sigil and Shadow Melting off the aggro, making sure that everyone else can walk past. Mirrors actually also was in combat, had to Shadow Melt as well. But no problem, still quicker this way compared to waiting for that patrol to go through.
Yeah, Mandatory now on the left-hand screen. Going to be grabbing the last trash pull here. This is a pretty scary one, but it is a Tyrannical Keystone instead of a Fortified Key, so they're just going to be focusing on damage. Not too much danger of dying, as they do have both Vampiric Embrace and Nature's Vigil in addition to their defensives to let them kind of power through the healing here. So starting off with Vampiric Embrace from Stove, that's probably going to be chained into Nature's Vigil from Mode, and that's going to be all... Actually, they don't even need to press Vigil. They can save it for the boss. That trash pack is already dead. A new Soul Well going to come down as well if anybody needs health stones.
Fluid.
For this RP
Yes.
to finish.
What type of GPU
Echo
do you
also
have?
waiting for some RP, and then going to
What GPU do I have?
Portal.
Mm-hmm.
So one trash pack
The
behind.
5600
Yeah,
XT.
it's almost a minute. In fact, it is a full minute when we factor in those death timers that Mandatory
Here,
are
can I have
in
a
the
fun
lead
time
here.
playing
They will
Helldivers
have their
too.
bloodlust for this last boss as well. As long as they don't
What?
wipe, even if the last boss goes
Can I have a
little
fun time
long,
playing
a
Helldivers
minute
too?
is just so much.
Oh, yeah, is it gonna be rough?
Yeah, it for sure is. It's
Yeah.
one of the
I
most
have
difficult boss
I
fights
can't
in
even
this,
play
in this
10
dungeon
AP
without
max
fear,
settings with
because you
my
have so much
GPU
damage
fluid.
coming in with the keepers,
I
with
usually
the
don't play with
magic,
max
also
settings,
the
so.
Infinity orbs, and then the AoE that happens in the last phase as well. that
Like
you can
I
so we'll see how
like
they're
it,
dealing
it's
with
done
this, as
points
Ardeos is
so
now
bad like I'm
engaged.
not even getting
As long as
60
it's available,
FPS.
they're going to be holding on to it for a
What's
little
going
bit
on?
to make sure that they
Okay.
get the extra damage
Well,
into the double keepers.
I will find out
Not
soon
only
enough.
because the double keepers are
You will.
one of the most dangerous parts of the fight, but also if
Yeah, I
you
think I'm just gonna
manage
buy a
to
20
get
Ti.
then Deus can actually fly into the air, which means that both Skylarks and
It's time
they
for a
actually
new
only have Skylarks
GPU.
as a melee DPS to get a little bit more damage onto the boss.
Yeah, I mean, it is really nice. We've actually seen some teams,
Yeah,
especially when
Echo can't
last
pull
Hope
this
were in
round
here, they were
out.
playing with the Feral Druid, so they would
Not
actually
gonna
just try
happen.
and make sure they just never got the boss to fly at all, and they were successful at that as well, to make sure they got to maintain that melee uptime. So we'll see if that is something that's possible for either of these teams. The Lust is being held for Mandatory, so we'll see when exactly it gets pressed. We're not going to have Infernal available for another 50 seconds. They're just going to hit Lust without it. We do have Incarn. Power Infusion's available as well. Do we PI the Incarn? Nope, we're going
Nah.
to hold that for Infernal, it looks like.
Yeah, don't PI the Mookin.
Yeah.
Combust being popped as well for Crims here. The PI still being held on to for Mace presumably. As the double keepers are walking to the portals, they are trying to nuke them down as fast as possible. Echo now also on Polar Deos, but obviously behind by quite a bit, close to a minute at this point. Deos is now flying in the air, so they did not manage to beat that timer, so Deos did actually fly. And at this point, they have to worry about their HP. They need to make sure they're spacing out their defenses properly, because there's just so much incoming damage onto the group with these orbs and with the AoE as well at this point.
Here comes Power Infusion, here comes that Infernal. Mandatory are now starting that final burn. Defensives are a little bit thin here, but in 3 seconds they're going to reach Vampiric Embrace, and that should be enough to get them over the finish line. It's off cooldown, and now it's pressed, and that is going to be doing huge healing to the group. Enough to get them through the last final bits of damage that they have to deal here. All of the aspects are now joining the fight as well, helping to attack Deus and buff the group here. And Mandatory are going to be advancing to an early 1-0 lead over Echo in our grand finals.
All right, Mandatory with the win in dungeon number 1, and you know that's 2 times in a row now that Mandatory have taken down Echo on Murazan's Rise. So it seems like you know, again from our large sample size, they have the definitive skills in this dungeon over Echo, but the only thing more dangerous than a regular Echo is a cornered and vulnerable Echo. They might lash out, they might strike back, and they're gonna have a chance in the next map, but for now it's all Mandatory.
I would describe what we just watched as catastrophic for Echo. That was so bad. They went for the very ballsy play of not activating the checkpoint, which I heard you guys talking about, and then were immediately punished. here on the other side, Mandatory activating that checkpoint, I was like, oh, I wonder if this is actually going to be a pretty big deal. I wonder if Echo's going to be able to win this map by 15 or 20 seconds because of the election to not activate that checkpoint. But just immediately, as soon as they don't activate that checkpoint, they get punished by this anomaly. He gets the untwist cast and takes down, I believe it was Mirez and Zalia? Mirez and Zalia just immediately die. They have to burn a battle res, but then they still don't have the ability to be able to res Mirez. Clix eventually ends up dying too, and Zalia has to run back from the beginning of the dungeon. Like, it was just so over the moment that happened. The moment that anomaly channeled that untwist onto all the players, it was basically Mandatory's map to lose. Mandatory didn't have like a perfect run. I think they got an extra familiar faces phase on Morchi, which cost them some time that they otherwise wouldn't have. They had, a death here and there, but overall, Mandatory looked phenomenal. And whenever we were talking about dungeons that Mandatory had to win to be able to take down the series, I think Rise was needed to be like an automatic win for them to be able to win the series. And you know what? Hey, they showed up and proved why they won the Rise in the last series and have shown that they're very consistent in this key.
Well, I do want to say that this run for Mandatory was their worst run by quite a bit even. Like, there was a 16-minute clear, while the other 3 runs were at least 20 seconds faster. So it was honestly a bit, I don't want to say lucky, because Echo did take that risk. They wanted to save those 3 seconds or 4 seconds to not open that portal, and it really paid off for Mandatory at this point.
Yes.
But yeah, not having the cleanest run here for them.
I think you saw it. The deviation also kept Skylark in combat for an extended period of time, and he wasn't able to get that fast meld into the summon, which cost them some time. And then obviously the familiar faces I talked about earlier, probably just another 10 or 15 second time loss that they otherwise wouldn't have had. There is a world where they do this dungeon, in 5:10 or 5:20 if neither of those things happen, but they get kind of rewarded by Echo making a lot of mistakes, and that looked uncharacteristically bad for Echo.
Yeah, at the end of the day, enough is enough for Mandatory to take the map, and you do have to kind of wonder, what's going on with Echo a little bit. It's out of character slightly. They've got a chance to bring it back, obviously, but we're about to go into another dungeon that Echo just recently lost to Mandatory in the first match of the day. It's that Atal Dazar. So it is interesting, but you have to think about it from the other side too, where it's like, let's say even if Mandatory wins Atal Dazar, well, then we would go to the Waycrest, right? Which is where Echo has probably looked best this weekend. And if they win that, they're still in it. Remember, it's not a best of 3. You need to win 3 dungeons this time to be the champion. So still some shots to come back, but yeah, Mandatory continue, even with the missteps, continuing to look very good.
Nagur and I casted the Atal Dazar whenever Mandatory beat Echo, and Nagur and I were talking about it. We actually think that Mandatory has the superior route over Echo. Dratnos, did you see that map? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree. I think this is also
I go grab my medicine, chat.
Map,
I'll be back.
It's a question of execution, though. That's the thing, right? Are we going to see Mandatory's best run stack up against Echo's best run? Because if so, I'm not confident, but I agree with you that it maybe is slightly Mandatory better. But in the real world, right, I think we're definitely at a point where either team's best run beat the other team's run with one small mistake, right? Alunza takes 1 heal on itself instead of a damage instance.
1 death.
And 1 death, 1 gateway that isn't where it's supposed to be. All those sorts of things are enough to swing this game in either team's favor, but it would be huge for Mandatory. If they could advance to a 2-0 lead against Echo, that would be unbelievably good for them, right? They would then have any of the next 3 maps to close it out with.
Did you guys figure out also where Echo gets the shield bearers on Volcall? That's something we gotta...
Yeah,
I don't know where they get those mods from.
We'll find out. Looks like the dungeon's getting underway.
I do also want to say, the last time Echo lost a grand... Well, the only time they lost a grand final was in a 3-0 sweep as well, right?
Yeah, in Sydney.
Yeah.
And if I'm not mistaken, I think Atal Dazar was a map in that series as well. So
yeah, possible.
I'm not 100% confident, but the stars could be aligning here for Mandatory as they're getting their first pull all set up here. We do, of course, have that 1 compositional difference between the 2 teams, which is the Ret Pally topping the meters for Mandatory versus the Moonkin also there for Echo. So Well, now they're actually both doing comparable damage. Yeah, oh no, Zaylee's down! Oh no, a wildfire, a free wildfire cast from an augur is going to just take Zalia out. That is very bad for Echo right at the start of this. That's going to cost them 5 seconds of death timer, plus they're a little bit slower to kill off that pack than they otherwise would have been. To their credit, they still killed it off at the same time as Mandatory. Really nicely done, actually, by Echo. But yeah, 5 seconds of death timer is not going to be good. Gingy going to pop that altar time, head on down these stairs. Little blink, a little tag, altar back. Oh no! He didn't tag before he altered back. Now he's going to have to run through the fire. Luckily, he's a fire mage, so that doesn't hurt him.
But lost some damage, right? Gingy not being able to get that tag in before pressing the altar means that they're going to be losing a little bit of Gingy's damage here, while Mandatory,
couple
on
of
the other
mistakes
hand,
already
didn't look
by
like they had
Echo.
any similar issues on their side. So they're going to be finishing off this trash a little bit quicker.
Mandatory's holding it down pretty
probably
good.
Not going to make a big difference because, of course, Alonso kind of killing herself with the transfusion cast whenever everyone does have that dot on them.
So Alunza, the idea is to kill it after the second transfusion, which means if you perfectly stand in all these puddles, the boss will deal 50% of her health to herself. But the other 50% you do have to do, and if you're a little bit slow, like you do actually need to be doing priority damage to the boss here, otherwise you're not going to be able to get the boss killed before that, or after that second transfusion. So you can see here for Echo, 34% as that cast is starting, 27% for Mandatory. So Mandatory are going to have it die right at the end of this transfusion cast. Look at that. Whereas Echo, 2% still, do still need to do a little bit of damage, are able to get it finished as well, but Mandatory 3 seconds ahead now, plus 5 seconds of death timer equals 8 seconds total is the lead for Mandatory.
Yeah, one more thing to mention here is that Echo did pull those augurs and the guards into Alunsa, while Mandatory is pulling it into Razan here. So a little bit of extra difficulty for a Mandatory on this pull, because they have to deal with those extra interrupts on those casters, and they have to deal with those guards as well that they're going to be dealing with on Razan, on top of the Sky Screamers and the sword packs they're pulling on top here too. Echo, on the other hand, pulling ahead on boss DPS here, maybe because they have to deal with less trash and have to worry about the gathering up of it a little bit less on their side. So Echo actually doing a lot of boss damage here.
Yeah, Zalia gonna proc one of these raptors here. A little bit of extra enemies coming in. And Gingy kiting Razan back over towards the corner they would rather be located at. Looks like they've got this mostly under control, as do Mandatory. Those augurs are a pretty deadly mob in a Tal'Dazar if there's a Juggernaut in the pool. If there's a Juggernaut in the pool, oh no! A fear's gone off, and that's going to actually proc his cheat death trinket. He does manage to get out of it and press his Feldev, and they're able to cleanse the afflicted that is under Razan. So yeah, those augurs, not actually too scary if there's no Juggernaut around. They won't cast Fiery Enchant, they'll just cast the Wildfire. A lot more manageable without that Juggernaut involved. Mandatory have cleaned that trash up. That fear, though, has cost them a little bit. They are a little bit ahead in count, and they do have those 5 seconds of death timer, but Echo are faster here on the boss. They do have to finish off those 2 Sky Screamers as well, but once they do that, the count's going to be basically equal between the two teams.
Yeah, it is, and we do know that Echo is going to be doing one of those bigger pulls in just a moment that is going to be pretty scary. But Clix does have Infernal available, actually, while Mason did use it at the end of Razan here. So again, a little bit of a difference in offensive cooldown usage here.
Okay,
yeah,
Echo making up a little bit of time for their death.
The sword pull, we are going to see the casters jumping on these ledges here, making sure they're not going to get any kind of damage from these swords jumping. Let's see if everyone does make it up there. It's a little bit of a tricky jump, but it looks like everyone is in position on the left and the right here. Click's jumping down for one moment to cast the Infernal.
Yeah, you need to be down to cast Infernal.
Yeah.
That, I love it. Yeah, great work. And then he demonic circles back up, so a nice little maneuver from the Warlock. As they, one benefit of the Echo comp here is you have a Solar Beam as well, which makes handling these Witch Doctors a lot less annoying. Although these mobs are now entering Raging, so that Solar Beam, that Sigil of Silence will not be respected. They have a Shield Bearer that they have individually soothed so that they can stun it out of that shield. Echo are finishing off that trash and are now heading upstairs. Imprison lands on one of those mobs. Zalia going on a brief adventure here to grab some more trash, it looks like.
That's the Shield Bearers.
Yeah, he's coming back now. That's where those Shield Bearers are coming from. Okay, so Zalia goes on an adventure to grab them. That's exactly where those two come from. And they're casting their shields right out. Doesn't matter where they're at, that's fine. Not affecting anything important with that. but Mandatory are also in combat with this boss. Both teams neck and neck right now. Echo slightly ahead, but Mandatory with 5 extra seconds of death timer. If this comes down to those 5 seconds, that is going to be such an unbelievable storyline here, and I think it might. This is getting really close. You can see Echo pushing into Volcall. 1, 2, 3 seconds ahead of Mandatory, but Mandatory 5 seconds of death timer is slightly ahead.
Yeah, and not to mention the shield bearers that Echo still has to deal with, right? Mandatory being a little bit quicker to reach the boss, and because they didn't need that extra trash, they did not need anyone to pull them. They could just go straight to the boss, and they don't have to deal with any of these interrupts onto the shield bearers at all.
And now Mandatory's
Echo has
ahead.
to deal with a little bit, which means that they're going to be losing a little bit of boss damage. You can see Mandatory ahead on boss DPS now, even though they did reach this phase later. Now, Mandatory also engaging the Witch Doctors on their side, which means that they also have to not focus damage into them, but they have to worry about seeing them while making sure they stay alive, which means that they also lose a little bit of DPS on the boss here.
Yeah, it's worth noting as well that Echo are going to be getting the count advantage out of this, especially with those shield bearers. They're going to be at almost 100% count, and they won't need to do much onto Yasma, whereas Mandatory will need to pull like 2 packs onto Yasma at the end of this run. That could slow them down, or it potentially could wipe them as well. We've seen a fear go off from a Sky Screamer before and kill teams on Yasma, so something that Mandatory will have to look out for, but honestly, I think Mandatory are still in position. If they can do it cleanly, this could be what they need right now as they run past. And they're going to be melding off and invising off this honor guard. Those who can. Mode can't. He is playing a Dwarf Paladin, has no ability to lose combat off of that honor guard. So he's going to be on his temporary mount only as he follows Mandatory. Crim's here going to activate that Waterfall RP. Tagging in a Sky Screamer, hitting it with that Frost Nova. And Skylark has all the count that they need now, but Echo are setting up as well. The gateway comes up so they can skip that Waterfall RP. They're running up the stairs. 96.4% for Echo, so they've only needed to pull a couple of enemies. Yasma becomes active at the same time for both teams, but Mandatory not quite ready to pull it yet. They do pull it, though, and this is going to be just a race to the finish line. As much damage as possible here needs to land on Yasma. Mandatory can't get distracted by all the trash that's going to be running in. They do need it to all get cleaved down, but they can't slow down at all on boss damage.
This is going to be so close. We do see both teams just using all of the offensive cooldowns they have available to cleave down Yasma and the trash here. Echo ahead on the boss DPS because they did pull the boss a little bit earlier, but of course a 5 seconds death penalty on their side, so they have to be faster than Mandatory by at least 5 seconds to be able to win this, and Mandatory is catching up by quite a lot. We do see that Mandatory did have to pull another Sky Screamer in comparison to Echo because of that enemy forces differential that we have between the teams. So Mandatory having 3 Sky Screamers while Echo only has 2. They're fighting. Echo's still a little bit ahead on boss percentage.
Yeah, I mean, this is fine. An extra Sky Screamer is fine as long as you land your kick. It's okay. They have got a Spider griefing them now, do Mandatory, but a Sigil of Chains is going to group all those ads back up. Gotta stay focused on the boss damage. Let's take a look at the cooldowns here. Wings is almost up. Full mode, it's available, and he presses it. So we've got Wings rolling. We're going to have Infernal in 20 seconds. Clix will not have another Infernal here, so Clix's damage is as good as it's going to be for the rest of this fight. Mandatory have hit 100% on that trash count, and they're about to make it back to Infernal.
Oh, damn.
Here, but
Echo might pull it
off.
off.
The boss, and once Echo kill this boss, it's going to be 5 seconds. That's all that Mandatory will have here. They will get back to Infernal, but they won't get much of it.
Yep.
Echo kill the boss. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Echo wins it. Very
They
nice.
managed to
Very
somehow,
nice.
with that death, still be a little bit faster. What on earth did we just
Beautiful.
witness?
What a finish
Beautiful.
for Echo to tie up the series like this. And I don't know, do you think maybe the extra mob on Yasma made the difference damage-wise? It's hard to say. I want to hear the breakdown for that map, but for now, Echo making it a series, and that's a map, again, that Echo lost to Mandatory in their earlier match today. So coming back, getting a little bit of revenge there exactly when they needed it, and that's got to help shake off some nerves they might have had from the first dungeon. That's a good mental reset too, but I think we're in for a fantastic series here.
This Ataldazar is incredibly close, dude. That got off to a really sketchy start with Zalia dying right after Dratnus goes to a really sketchy start with Zalia. Tip things, tip the balance here. It's just Zalia dying to the wildfire from the auger. It was quite unfortunate for him as well, because then
They
he's
still
like,
pulled it off.
he doesn't have any damage. He has to run
Doesn't
back,
even
he doesn't
matter.
have any astral power. There's just like a lot of momentum that they lose. But I think Mandatory actually lost a lot of time setting up Razan. Mode ends up like running off and pulling a lot of trash into Razan. And so the alternative is what Echo did with the shield bearers into Volcall, whereas Mandatory pull basically and snap all this trash into Razan, which I think slowed them down a lot because Mode was off on like an adventure for probably 15 seconds as opposed to being able to hit the boss. And so that allowed them to get a little bit behind on the boss. I still don't love the shield bearers into Volcall. Their Volcall is noticeably slower than Mandatory's, but I think that whenever you compare it with the Razan, it's just a slightly different route. And then you also have now basically, dude, that guy's been using the Shadowflame Rocket Tanker on CD. I don't know if you guys have been paying attention. That guy literally just like pressed it to pull the trash into Yasma as well. Like, that guy's literally just using them on CD. It's crazy though. I thought that Echo was gonna lose after starting off with that death. This is
me too.
I mean,
very close.
Right to the end of it. I mean, the question was, is that death actually going to make the difference? And it very nearly did.
Incredible. I mean, 928 with a death on the first pull. What a run from Echo. And I mean, that means their potential here is probably like a 920 or something.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm so sad we will not see another Atal Dazar in this MDI, right? Like, this is just such a powerhouse dungeon for these two teams, and a well-deserved victory by Echo. That's going to tie up our series 1-1. So basically, we're moving into a best of 3 now, right? We've got the
pretty much. Yeah, sure. You can
Yeah,
call
I
it
don't really
that.
consider it like that.
Yeah,
Well, maybe.
Reset the
discard
bracket.
These first two results. It's all good.
Yeah.
And I think if you're Mandatory, you gotta just do that mental reset. You've beaten Echo in a best of 3 before. You did it earlier today. I think that these last 3 maps are better for Echo than the first 2 were. I think that
Definitely.
those first 2 were some of Mandatory's best shots at Echo. But Waycrest Manor, Darkheart Thicket are both Sanguine dungeons, so we're moving into at least, I mean, we're going to see these 2 for sure, right? We're going to see these 2 Sanguine dungeons. That is a very, very high-stress Sanguine dungeon. Running a Sanguine dungeon as a weekly key is one thing. Running it at this high stakes is going to be such a nerve-wracking experience, but at this point, both Mandatory and Echo are such veterans of this MDI format, I don't think that it's going to get to them.
So whenever you look at this Black Cold, I think this Black Cold is like, I don't want to say it's a guaranteed loss for Mandatory because nothing is guaranteed in the MDI, but I think that is not a map that you hope that this goes to. I think that for like Mandatory winning the series, it probably involves them back-to-back winning Waycrest Manor and Darkheart Thicket. And again, Waycrest Manor, having talked to the teammates of Mandatory, that is the dungeon that they put the most time into. And so there's a chance that they are able to beat Echo here, but Echo's looked automatic in that key. This is going to be a really tough series, and I think this Waycrest Manor is like a pivotal moment for this series.
I'm trying to remember what happened last time. Oh, go ahead.
I want to say that I disagree. I do think that Echo is very favorite in this Waycrest Manor. Like, I don't think, if both teams have a perfect run, then I don't think that Mandatory has a chance to beat Echo because they're just like approximately 20 to 30 seconds faster with their route. But I do think that BRH is a dungeon that Mandatory can win, because even though
Mandatory's gonna win this.
With the snapping of the
That's gonna happen, unfortunately.
Mandatory with their perfect route is only
Unfortunately
like,
for Echo.
16,
Sorry,
17
I didn't mean to
seconds
stop
slower
there.
without that snapping strategy. So I do think they can. Find
Mandatory's
a couple
been
seconds
holding
here
it
and
down.
there. I think the snapping strategy looks flashy, but I don't think it's actually as fast as we think it is. If it's
Waycrest Manor, eh?
Strategy is executed really well, personally.
Dorky said that he thought it was about 25 seconds saved.
Well,
whenever I was talking to him earlier.
Mandatory somehow cleared without the strategy only 17 seconds.
Yeah, that's true.
So...
if they picked it up, hey.
I don't know.
I'm trying to remember. Did Mandatory have a little bit of Sanguine healing on this dungeon earlier today too? I feel like maybe there was a ton of like a tick or two on the boss ended up making a difference because there was like a 30-second difference. So, yeah, with 0 deaths on both sides earlier today too between these two teams. So it really does come down to those things, right? Not the deaths necessarily, but the routing, a tick or two of Sanguine here and there.
I think it was Sanguine on Soulbound from memory.
It was, I think so. I'm trying to remember.
That is usually the boss you Sanguine if you're
usually,
Sanguining a boss.
Yeah,
it's that one or it's Heartsbane Triad.
Yeah. So, but do we think it's things like that, like little tiny, you know, errors that add up, or do we think it's just an actual route thing where Mandatory needs to just, well, I suppose it's a little bit late now, but the route they have chosen may just simply be slow?
I think it is slower, but I think that it's going to come down to the execution of these strategies between the two teams, because even though we've seen zero-death runs from both teams out of Waycrest Manor, there's always a chance that something goes horribly wrong, especially with how aggressive some of these
Echo's
pulls
going
are.
right.
Let's take
Mandatory's
a look at
going
Echo
left.
here, as now is going to hop on those Shadow Flame rockets for this first pull. He is just using those, like Title said, on CD, just able to, like, speed hack his way through the dungeon, basically, with those things. Getting this huge pull together. A hunt from downtown is going to let him grab all the hallway, and they'll be setting up this pull onto Rawl the Gluttonous. This is Echo's big time save right here. This pull is so much count, a great use of their Bloodlust, but it's very dangerous. They've got a lot of stuff they have to look out for here. A lot of the space on the ground is going to kill them if they stand in it, so they have to be really, really careful.
Yeah, we do have to take a look at Echo's
got a hell of a strategy. Pull everything all at once.
Fuck
yeah.
Damage, while they also
Get
have
it.
to worry about the tenderizers from the boss that have to
Mandatory
be dodged
went
out
for
from,
the
also have
sisters
Sanguine
instead.
just all over the place, which can be deadly as well if you stand in it on top of all of this other damage that is happening, honestly. So they're doing a really good job so far.
Echo's got the Mistweaver, so yeah, they're pulling huge mobs, so that Mistweaver can cleave as much as
so
possible.
it doesn't actually matter as much as long as they don't have to
Cleave, heal.
as long as they survive, as long as Now survives. The trash doesn't really matter if it heals.
Healing a Steward is not great, because those mobs are really obnoxious. They do a lot of tank damage for one thing. They do those dinner bells, which deny a lot of space on this fight, so it's not the best thing to Sanguine heal them, but it's also fine. As long as you're not healing Rawl, you don't care too much, and Echo seem to have mostly stabilized here, so big win condition number 1 for Mandatory was a wipe on this pull. It's not going to happen, but now Sigil, he's going to proc his cheat death, so that's not good. Echo are now without a cheat death for a while, and we've seen tanks without cheat deaths fall over awfully quickly in this dungeon.
Yeah, and they certainly seem to be a little bit slower in this pull than what we've seen them here before. Like the last Sanguine healing that they had on this boss was like 30 million. It wasn't on the boss, but on the trash. And now we are 55 million in, so they healed the stewards quite a bit more than usual, and they're also a bit slower on finishing off the boss here. Mandatory is going to be done with the Briar in just a moment, and they're going to be gathering up for their Goliath pull. Echo finishing off the boss in just a moment as well, but certainly a little bit slower than what we've seen before.
Yeah, we've got Mode in the back there. Everybody being careful to not activate that Witch as they run forward. And this is now the big courtyard pull for both teams. Matron Brindle, Soulbound Goliath, all activated, all in combat. Both teams, neither team can afford to not do this, but you have to be really careful now, because if you Sanguine heal Matron Brindle, or if you Sanguine heal Soulbound Goliath, it is very bad news. It looks like Matron Brindle is bathing in the Sanguine for Mandatory. That's not great. At least it's not Soulbound Goliath, but you can see the healing on that on the HPS meter. The Sanguine is up to 14 million healing for Mandatory. That is going to slow them down a bit. Oh, spikes up again. This looks like Matron Brindle got another tick or two.
And we do have a second Thorns on Mirrors for Echo here. Already had used that human racial, now sitting in the Thorns, or at least has to be damaged out. Did a good job though on Echo's side, being able to get Mirrors out of that one. And Mandatory on their side also having some on Crimps, which is very nice. We do see Echo actually a little bit ahead on boss percentage, but not that much at all. Of course, again, boss percentage is really what matters here. Brindle is gonna die first. They just have to make sure it's not dying under the boss. You don't get any of that Sanguine healing onto it. But yeah, a little bit of a Sanguine on Brindle. Not gonna be the end of the world, as long as they don't go down to any of that damage that Brindle does in combination with any of the Thorns or the AoE that Goliath does if you drag him into it.
Yeah, gotta be extremely cautious here. Even though Soulbound Goliath is low, it can get full healed by just one Sanguine puddle if you're not careful. So, vitally important moments of this fight as Matron Brindle does go down for Echo. They have gotten through the Sanguine danger. Mandatory pulling some more trash now onto Soulbound Goliath, because of course they have all of the Rawl the Gluttonous trash they still need to do. Echo have already killed it all. Matron Brindle is about to die here. Soulbound Goliath doesn't get a tick. Nice. It's okay. We're all good. So Mandatory are still fine. They did Sanguine heal Matron a little bit, but Soulbound Goliath at least not so much. And, yeah, the problem is, I mean, you can look at the enemy forces count at the top of the screen here. Echo have gained 15% more count than Mandatory as a result of their aggressive first pull of the dungeon. Now, Mandatory can gain some of that back because they can also do a big pull next, but they won't have Lust for it. They won't be able to do quite as much trash as Echo did.
And Molt actually running really low on mana on Mandatory's side, as we got another set of Thorns on Stove there. Not being able to get out of that one, had to full heal Stove, just spam heal him. And that's gonna another set of Thorns on Stove.
Oh no!
This might be death, as they don't have Cocoon available or Dispersion, and a leap as well from.
He was rooted in the Sanguine there as well,
yeah.
So that was healing the Soul Thorns and killing him. Brutal combo for Mandatory. Soulbound Goliath did heal from Sanguine for them as well for a total of 5 million, so that is not good. Mandatory are in some trouble here. They're going to attempt to recover it, but Echo are already on the Heartsbane Triad. Echo are already at 65% count. Mandatory reaching the boss fight here, but Skylark is going to have to live against these stewards with no cheat death trinket. That is very, very scary.
Yeah, definitely a little bit of a scary moment here for Mandatory. The Echo pull on the Sisters not going to be that difficult for them to handle because they don't have as much trash here. There's some captains and some of the Acolytes from the side. Mandatory on the other hand. Crims does go down to a Tendrils in combination with the bleeds from the Gorgers here. They do have a Battle Rest available, and they do have Macing that needs to cast that Soul Stone that is going to be used in just a moment. But yeah, now they're out of Battle Rests. And yeah, another scary moment here for Mandatory.
Yeah, this is a very, very sketchy part of the dungeon. Mandatory are still okay, but the problem is, it seems like everything's low, but as soon as you kill one of these trash mobs, you drop Sanguine that heals the rest of them, and Skylark goes down to a melee from a steward, and that's going to mean that the whole group here is in so much trouble. Rawl the Gluttonous is going to end up killing the rest of them here, and they're going to have to release and figure out a way back. Invis pots, okay, no, they're going to grab this one soul essence. They're going to take it with them. They still have a witch they need to dodge here. They don't want to activate, so they're still going to have to hug the wall here. And, I mean, yeah, Mandatory are now several minutes behind.
Yeah, this is so unfortunate for Mandatory, just losing so many defensive cooldowns on that Goliath pull earlier, just struggling so much. And now that Rawl pull, again, very dangerous for them, especially without that Bloodlust available in comparison to what Echo did at the very start of the dungeon. Yeah, Echo looking really strong, though. We know that this Waycrest Manor is one of their best dungeons this weekend. They're just looking so good in here. Sister Briar about to go down. They do have to finish off the Acolytes that they pulled into the boss with, like, they're just on the side here, but they also pulled some more trash onto the boss earlier with Elias Transcend, as we did see earlier today. And once they finish off this boss here, they're going to be going downstairs. They do have to invis pot through a sister spawn here. That is something we're going to see in just a moment. So we see 2 Invis Potions on Flix and Mirrors because they are actually they're human, so they don't have Shadow Melt. While the other 3 players, they're going to be Shadow Melting off the aggro in just a moment from that sister. You'll see that Shadow Melt go through. There it is. And then they can skip that Witch, and they're going to be going downstairs into Lord and Lady Wake.
Yeah, now is going to grab that Matron Alma, bringing it with them. They've got a couple of mobs in a Sigil of Misery that will be joining soon as well. A nice new Soul Well is going to let them restock on Health Stones, which, you know, always nice. It's only been 8 minutes, so it's hard to imagine they've used all 3 charges, but you never know, as we now have Lord and Lady Waycrest engaged. And Echo are approaching the end of this dungeon. If they can stay clean here, if they can avoid massive Sanguine healing, causing mobs to stay alive too long and killing them, they should be in good shape here. See, that's the problem with Sanguine in this area, is if you get a little bit of Sanguine healing in some dungeons, it's like, this is okay, we're a little bit slower. But there are some parts of the dungeon like this, where if you Sanguine healing these Soul Charmers, you're just going to get overwhelmed by casts that you don't have interrupts for, right? So you actually do need to really make sure that Sanguine healing doesn't happen to those wrong mobs.
Oh, we did.
Yeah, Lord Waycrest, I think, got a tick there.
Yeah,
that's okay.
Yeah, it's not too bad. Because again, the HP, the full HP of Lord Waycrest is not that high because of that health transfer that Lady Waycrest is doing periodically. So not too bad to get the Sanguine Heal off here. And yeah, Mandatory now down with Ral. They're going to be moving downstairs in just a moment as well. Of course, with those 7 deaths on the board and with just generally being behind, it's going to be very difficult for Mandatory to catch up here. But this is a best of 5, so even if Echo is finishing off this dungeon here, it's of course not over for Mandatory just yet, and they can recover and get back into this series here, into this grand final series. But Echo just looking so strong in his Wake Rest. And even though they looked a little bit shaky in those first 2 dungeons, right? Losing that Rise, having lots of mistakes there, and then even having some mistakes in that Taldasar as well, even though they had the fastest run of the weekend. So yeah, Echo definitely not infallible.
Yeah, I mean, Echo have done a good job of coming into this Wake Rest Manor and doing a clean run in one of the hardest dungeons in our map pool. So incredibly impressive to them. Mandatory have to do the same thing. They have to shake off the result of this map, and they have to be like, look, yeah, we lost. It sucks now. We're down 2-1, right? We need to win our next 2, but we know we can do it. We are a world-class team. We are a team that can challenge Echo, and we're going to prove it, right? So that's got to be the mindset if you're a Mandatory player, a Mandatory fan here, is that it is not over yet. It is a best of 5. They can recover. You know, they can stay in this series. These 3 maps, this is going to be the least close of our first 3 maps, but they came really close to winning that Ataldazar, and they did win that first map in the series. So this is a team that should feel confident that they can challenge Echo, and does mean that the other maps are going to have to, of course, all go their way. But at this point, there's not much that can be done about that. You just are going to have to play for that because Echo are closing in on the end of the dungeon. They are running down the final corridor here, and there is just one boss fight separating Echo from match point here. Boss is pulled, Lust is available. Here come all of their cooldowns.
Yes, the Infernal and the PI being used onto clicks here in just a moment as Mirrors is gathering up. And Bloodlust, of course, running as well. The only thing that's not available is to combust, but it's going to come up in just a moment as well. Now we need a perfectly placed Ring of Peace by Sally in just a moment as the horror's going to go down. And there we go, Ring of Peace coming out. No Sanguine Heal. Onto Gork Tool. Some of them actually really close to the boss. Now it needs to stand perfectly still to make sure Gork Tool is not going to move into either of these pools on the side.
What a gamer there. That is a tense moment there. Very close to full healing Gorak Toll off of Sanguine, but now found the pixel to stack Gorak Toll to avoid that. Well done.
Yep, and of course Gorak Tool at this point the only thing left. They do have 100% enemy forces, so no trash missing, which is something that happened to Aka before, that they finished off the last boss and did not have the full count. But no problem this time around. It even happened in Wake Rest Manor.
That happens to me in every Wake Rest Manor, but it is not going to happen to Echo in this one. They are doing great. They are just getting over the finish line here. Absolutely looking phenomenal here. This has been their cleanest dungeon of the weekend. That is going to be a 12-minute and 40-second Wake Rest Manor.
Wow.
Echo will advance to a 2-1 lead. Mirez, yeah, no big deal. Not a problem.
Don't pick your nose. Do not pick your nose. Do not pick
Just
your
a
nose.
scratch. It's just a scratch. It's just an itchy nose. That's all. All right, get him off the screen. Victory
He
for
was
Echo.
able to scratch
Yum.
Yeah, that's right. Oh man, we've all had that situation, right? Well, you're running a dungeon and like you know if you take your hands off the keyboard, your party dies.
Good run by Echo there.
Crazy, yeah. Happens to the best of us. But
Mandatory
Echo
blowing it.
extending their victory, doing it cleanly. Let's talk a little bit more about the dungeon.
What's up, buddy?
I was trying to get on Sanguine Watch for this key.
Another debut.
But I think that Mandatory kind of had large
Live on the
Sanguine
Fluid
issues, and I assumed that
stream.
there was just going to be Sanguine issues.
Here we go.
They did heal Soulbound
Where am
Goliath
I?
at the very beginning.
You're over
of the
here.
boss.
Here, actually,
The
here.
boss
Why don't we do
for
this?
Mandatory was just like standing in the Sanguine, but it wasn't really
Oh,
that
wait,
big
actually,
of a
nope,
deal.
not even that one.
Stoke
Hold
goes
on.
down to Soul Thorns. Again, not the end of the world, but again, not a great
There we
position
go.
to be
There
in.
we
There's a
go.
stool right there if you want, bud.
And then
Right
they had a
behind you.
full wipe to Raw. That was pretty much the end of the run overall.
Yeah,
Echo
kind of figured so.
pretty
There
much
you go.
perfect. They had some Sanguine healing on Lord Waycrest, so I guess it could have been better, but you can only be so critical of a 12:40 run in
Yeah.
this key. And Echo
They just got done with a
really
round,
are starting to
so
turn it
they're
on. They
basically
look
speed running these
bad
dungeons.
in the Rise, and now they are no longer looking like that team that we saw in the Rise. Instead, they're looking like their old selves
they're
again, and they're
fucking
looking like they're able
killers.
to win.
Ew.
How many MDIs were
Yeah,
up?
so I went
7?
to Best Buy.
Z?
I didn't buy the protection.
Many?
Any knowers?
So it's a paper.
Many?
Like,
Yes.
A couple?
Fuck.
Yeah, one of
For the
them.
most
Okay.
part,
There,
might not be
another one.
Seventh.
I'm
We're
still gonna buy a graphics.
it's a lot. It's a lot.
I can only count up to one hand. Once it involves the second one, I
Word.
it's difficult.
So
Okay.
so 7 then. Okay.
Play with
Got it.
yeah, we can play with this. See if we can figure something out.
It's probably better.
Well,
with Zoe's got
Echo does put themselves one map away from winning the
Yeah,
NDI
for sure,
yet
better than
again.
those.
And
what is it
you know,
again? What is
mandatory. I
this?
keep wanting to say they've got a chance the same way
Oh,
I keep
yeah.
wanting to say that
yeah,
Echo
it's a
looked
bit
vulnerable, but
better.
I don't know if either one is true at this point. I mean, we talked about it earlier. I think Dratnos, you brought up this point that it really was the first couple maps that mandatory you felt kind of had to do well on, because when we got to this point
God, they
in
got
the
so much
potential
shit
best
going
of
on.
5, Echo really kind of is in position to pop off.
Yeah, I mean, it is a brutal remainder of the series here for mandatory. Next up, we are going to get to see Dark.
Yeah, we pretty much got everything set up the same now. Like
Hell
with
yeah.
That window. Well, except you have all yours in this pop out.
Oh,
I
the
have OBS
chat
in it.
thing. Gotcha. Yeah, there's just not enough room in the OBS window for everything, unfortunately. I even streamed to Facebook today. So yeah, so I got all 4. And then I just got my Streamlabs events over here.
Alright.
Hey, Ava.
Bubblegum boohoo.
Yeah. And then this one's just kind of my extra screen.
I wish I had an extra screen. So you're running 4 monitors off of yours? So one's not Zoe's anymore?
Correct.
Yeah, it'd be
Because
nice
I'm able to
to-
stream off right off my computer now.
I know, I'm like, damn, it'd be nice just to have one more screen. And people ask, like, damn, 3 screens, isn't that enough? Like, nah.
No, and to be honest, I'm thinking about I want another one.
Yeah.
I want the big
I like the
widescreen
one,
up top.
I like when you had it over here and you had the TV up.
The big TV. Yeah, that big TV really dragged on my graphics card though.
But that would be good for this, or something.
It was okay, but like I said, it really drew a lot on my graphics card because it was having to either do all the downscaling for that big screen
I would
or
hook it up into internal graphics, running off your CPU.
yeah, it's just too much to drag on the system.
It
I don't like
sucks.
it.
Well, you got an extra slot for
Plus,
another.
it's a TV, not a monitor, so it really.
You have an extra slot. That's a double wide.
What do you mean? I got an extra slot for what?
slot for another graphics card.
Right now it's being used by a USB. I got it's like 7 3.0 USBs and 3 USB Cs, so that way I
And
can
those are
plug in
being
all the
put-
extras. And 2 mics. I usually have 2 mics because I used to do Tarkov Mass. You know, all the extra stream deck.
Who's all
and-
on the Discord channel right now? Just you still?
I think Chungus was in here. He's in here, but he's doing something else right now.
Oh yeah.
Since I'm still watching this. Oh,
Darkheart in Blackrock Cold, which
Either a perfect typhoon or any Nox or
Helldivers
sigil
2?
chains, you can lose a ton of time and just not get Oakheart spawned. And we're in a situation right now where I don't know who's about to win this
All right,
Darkheart
chat.
ticket. I think that
We can go take a dab.
Marissa said is
We'll be
absolutely
back.
Spot on. We are basically coin flipping as to who's about to win this DHT.
Yeah, I mean, you have to assume that Echo at least has the best start so far. Incredibly likely that they have Who does that?
Can I?
Well, I mean,
do
if
that
you gotta,
too?
if you gotta go.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, it's Waker's Manor. Yeah.
Oh, we got it.
Yeah,
Confirmed.
they're doing a rerun.
T-Rex arm, open mouth. Sounds like they're back at their Android versus Nexus last chance.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah,
there's
that
the
gates,
gateway
yeah,
coming
there's-
through. Nice. Okay. And this big pull is getting underway for mandatory. They're gonna be faster
completely. As some of the sanguine does
Oh,
heal up.
no.
The mirrors does go down again. You don't have available. 45 seconds.
Yeah, this is you know, they're gonna be doing one second half of the box. Mandatory.
that rest here at the very end of the boss fight. As for now,
as well, which is annoying. Those dryads are always very difficult to group up. We're also on the same board here. Nope, not quite. It's up to 10. Upgrade for Echo. It's happening there.
Now all of the weapons that
They have a little bit more count than they need even here as well. So actually they can skip the first hit here. I think. Don't even need to do that. Be able to press it and send this boss home, reaching that 50% mark. Here comes no, it's stock rock, right? So chaos side of the screen as well. So a little bit of at this point, it's a are now for the Mandatory fans. Like, well, Mandatory had an opportunity to have ended the series here. Had a significantly and I think so Mira's death on what he did massive snap is certainly an insane strat that other teams would have picked up, but unfortunately, that was just a huge issue here. And then somebody ends up dying because we have to melt red. We're just lollygagging. Meanwhile,
down to like defensives and preparation on the pulls. Very rarely I feel like does it come down to and just with the extra just with how he's done.
Unbelievably dangerous pull.
Yeah, let's take a look at both teams. Can off Echo. Let us
This is unbelievable extra damage that Echo have somehow found. Stop the 130. And Lady Valkyrie is also impressed with, particularly Last Hope, is that when this pull is like halfway done, they somehow already spawn the commander boss.
And of course, they're going to be pulling those 2 archers and the tank. Once they summon and snap everything up to
Yeah, wow, Skylark is setting up the same idea here. But it looks like combat also nice. Android also will be able to get this done quickly. And got this pull started. There they go, all the mobs snapping in, but Echo also have 10 seconds. Huge advantage for Mandatory as they hold and this is it. This is the last game of the series. They have to find a way to do 7% on this is the second last boss. But they are trying to do what they can to just damage.
Is incredible. Both of these teams are just insane. As Smash Up mandatory outside that. Another really dangerous coming up.
On Smash, it's gonna go down. It's a scary one. You have one to get out of here. Stove ends up getting hit by one of those bullets. He doesn't really have many of those defenses left for him. He's going to be in a lot of trouble. Crim's on. Needing to watch. Alright. He's got a little bit more of the net with their talent. Something that Melon would be in the so much damage to your group, but the boss is just absolutely melting from mandatory. They're gonna be the champions of the inside the bloodlust as well. This is it. This is it.
shit, man. This map, it got off to such a favorite start. Like they were 10 seconds ahead from later on and had better protection management. The moment that flushes up,
indeed, bucking expectations, bucking the Twitch chat predictions, finally ending for Echo. It happened eventually, but it's still just they have all week. This is a team. In the last 2 days. Crazy, they got it done. And hey, yeah, we gotta shout out Hanks, right? And legendary. Bask in the glory. You deserved it. They're getting that gold medal right in the middle of your screen right there. And going home with the silver. Yeah. Mailing out the gold medal is going to have to get 5 years since the last defeat, because Echo is still obviously a team that deserves those are the goats today. They are the goats.
this finals.
Yeah, well, that's what we
I
talked
agree,
about. This is kind of called best team, but right. Dogs who managed to send them to the lower bracket in the group stage. So for the first time, I think it's Echo
Oh god, that's not what
I said
and
Dips
now he's
first,
smiling
so-
because he knows he's been caught.
Yeah.
Dips on the second
Look, man,
question.
that's how Dips
I've got mine. So many people who answer this.
Great. I can't think of a there's been so many FBI weekends. Several of their
Well, it's a reunion of the broadcast, okay? Listen, we haven't seen them on the broadcast in a hot minute. They're reuniting with us.
It's been a long time, I suppose. Like,
Well, they won a TGP Cup. Yeah, it's okay. Dude, I feel like such a nerd being so excited about the NBA finals.
I've let myself believe that a team was going to be Epic so many times before, and it just never works out. See the light.
At least some of the players of our winning team mandatory. Get in there at some point, yeah. Wow.
When did you pick up that snapshot? Was that something you had going into this weekend as well? Something that you and
solid 20 second.
builds were like very hard to execute.
To sleep. I don't decide. I don't know what's gonna happen. I just can't believe it. Hello? How much is this? Yeah, I don't know. Prefer if it wasn't allowed, but I did enjoy it playing Red Paladin a lot. It's a cool niche, something.
That's awesome. So looking forward, does you done that? Now we can move on to something
See, that's what I was asking.
It's been a long day. It's been a long day. It's been a crazy day. I think. Do you have any other questions? Otherwise,
One map guesser that can run here. Down the stairs, and then they're jumping down to fight Razan right now.
oh my gosh.
I think it happens. I think you're right.
Yeah.
Has to be a thought.
I don't know. Hang on.
I'd like to thank Dratnus for carrying us on this one. I would have definitely gone the wrong way.
Yeah, thank you, Dratnus. Team, of course, first of all. I think we played really good, and even though we have a difficult time, and
to all my viewers over the years and the people who have supported me. I'm so proud of this team. Like, it's amazing. Through inconsistency
What are your thoughts on the weekend here? The whole tournament, honestly.
At this point, it's all about management. They're going to be their month there. Was unbelievable.
Season 4, isn't that amazing? Yeah, I think that from everybody behind the scenes.
All right, that may have been the worst watch party ever. I apologize. Of course, everything has to happen right as I start streaming, because God forbid. Everybody. Never mind. Not gonna bitch. We're gonna be back in about an hour. I'm gonna go eat, and we'll be back on. We're gonna do some Helldivers tonight. Game on. We'll see you guys there.